I might insert a picture. You can technically make them yourself, but I don't want to. I don't want to, and I refuse to make that. Hey guys, so today I'm just going to show you how I went ahead and made these dried citrus garland for the Feast of Sukkot. So you want to start with freshly washed and dried fruit. You want to make sure that they're dried because the goal is to have these fruit dried anyway, and they all have their natural juices. Each different fruit has its own different amount of natural juices. I get into that a little bit later, but you don't want to be adding extra water because that'll just take it longer for it to dry. So the fruit that I chose to use were oranges, limes, and grapefruits. I think they give slightly different hues when they're dried so that there's some color play a little bit. You can make this easier by using a mandolin. I've had some bad experiences with that. I think I've chopped good chunks out of my hands a couple times with the mandolin, so I try to stay away from the mandolin. But you could use a mandolin. I think it'll be easier to get more uniform chop slices. Now, once I put them in the oven, I try to put the temperature as low as possible. I think I have it here set at 170. I ended up going up to 200 after a couple rounds just because it was taking entirely too long. But you do want to make sure that you're being careful to keep an eye on it because you can easily burn the fruit. I think I did to one batch, so it looks a little bit more chocolatey than red, the grapefruit. You probably want to set it for 2 to 3 hours. If you're doing it at 200, I would set it for an hour. It takes a couple rounds, so I think each batch I ended up having to run a couple times. What I have is like a baking sheet, and then I have a wire rack on top of the baking sheet so that it's kind of raised up off of the bottom of the baking sheet, and then I have just some parchment paper on top. And I do this just so that the air can flow through the fruit as it's in the oven. But if you have a dehydrator, more power to you. Now you want them kind of as dry as you can make them without burning them. The limes were able to get really dry, but that's just because the nature of limes, they don't tend to hold a lot of moisture. The grapefruit got dry, but not as dry as the limes, and the orange didn't get, it pretty much was like, I don't think the orange got really dry. I picked up some embroidery needles, and then I also picked up some twine. What is this twine, or like burlap threading? When cutting this thread, I try to cut it at a sharp angle so that it's easy to thread it through the needle. I would advise to tie only one knot so that it can pass through the fruit easier. If you tie 2 knots, it'll get stuck and you have to do extra work to like pull it through the flesh of the fruit. Now, when I decided to thread, I decided to use the prettier side of the fruit. So I wanted the prettier side of the fruit to face forward. So I start by piercing the side that I want to see and then run that thread behind the fruit and bring it on through back the other side. While you're threading the fruit, you'll notice that the thread gets a little bit sticky, and that again is because of, like I mentioned before, the natural sugars that are still in the fruit. So your fingers will get a little sticky. The children's fingers will get a little sticky if they're helping you with this part. And it'll kind of get a little bit harder to pull that thread through. Now, once I finish threading the fruit, I just tie a double or triple knot at the end just to ensure that the fruit doesn't by chance slip all the way out. Now, to create the top loop, what I did was I folded that thread over twice to kind of thicken the string and then tied it like a shoestring. So the reason why I made the loop so big was because I had initially intended to loop the garland onto my curtain rod like this. I'll put a little picture. But that didn't work out so well in terms of opening and closing my curtains. So I ended up just using safety pins to safety pin it to my curtain, so maybe you don't have to make as big of a loop if that's what you're gonna do. And that's it, guys. Now I've got these beautiful garlands that were fun to make. It took a little bit of time and effort, but I think they're beautiful. I'm not sure about how long lasting they are because, again, this is natural fruit with natural sugars and natural moisture. So I'm not sure if they'll last until next year, but at least it was a fun project to do this year.